The House Committee on Elections will now come to order. The clerk will call the roll.
Chairman Smith.
Here.
Vice Chair Busey.
Here.
Rep Burrows. Rep Capriglione.
Here.
Rep De Ayala.
Here.
Rep Manuel.
Here.
Rep Morales. Rep Swanson.
Here.
Rep Vo.
Here. A quorum is present. I want to thank everybody for being here. I know we have a couple people are out right now. I think that let's keep Chairman Burrows' wife in our prayers. She had a little procedure, and that's why he's not here. But I appreciate you all being here. And thank you to Speaker Phelan for this appointment, and I'm anticipating a great session. And I look forward to working with each and every one of you. Just a couple of housekeeping measures we need to talk about. This is our regular meeting room and day. It is possible the meeting time will vary. However, this is our regular room and day of the week. Please be mindful of the number of members in the back room. We understand if you need to step out for a reason, meet with the staff, or take a phone call, but just make sure there is never more than 5 or more in the back room at a time. Please remember to turn your microphone on when you begin to speak. Your microphone button's located in front of you. I think most of you have figured that out now. But please turn it off when your questioning is ended. Otherwise, the microphones, if they're left on, there will be feedback heard online. A couple of other housekeeping items before we get started. We only will be taking invited testimony today. If you're testifying, please make sure you have filled out the electronic witness affirmation form on the registration kiosk in the hallway. If you have any issues filling out the form, please ask a staff member and they will be happy to help. By the way, our staff today, our new committee clerk is Lauren McCarthy, and Kia Campos from my office will be helping today. With that said, I want to welcome you all to the inaugural hearing of the House Committee on Elections for the 88th Legislature. Today, we will be discussing general items as it relates to our committee. We have invited testimony beginning with the Secretary of State, the Texas Department of Public Safety, the Texas Association of Election Administrators, and lastly, County and District Clerks Association of Texas. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome all members of our committee, and I'm pleased to have Representative Busey as Vice Chair. I would like to offer him a moment to say a few words at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For those of you that don't know, the chairman and I both are kangaroos from Austin College, so we'll make sure this does not appear to be the kangaroo court up here. But now, Mr. Chairman, I want to congratulate you on your appointment. I look forward to working with you and with every member of this committee to uphold the freedom to vote for every eligible Texan. Voting is the foundation of democracy. It is the cornerstone on which all of our liberties rest. Texans deserve free and fair elections, accessible, modern, and robust in practice, free from doubt and conspiracy and outcome. It's my hope that this committee will work together to ensure every eligible Texan has the opportunity to register and make their voice heard at the ballot box, to seek common sense solutions to modernize Texas's elections and support our county officials and our election workers in their efforts as the vanguard of our democracy. We know that Texas is one of the hardest states to vote, and it still ranks among the bottom of states in turnout, especially so for young Texans and people of color. We must do better and develop policies that lead to a healthy and vibrant democracy where we all have a voice in shaping our future. I know that together we can ensure that our elections are a success and they continue to be smooth and secure for all Texans. Mr. Chairman, I'm so excited to work with you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Excited to work with you. Thank you very much, Vice Chair. The Chair would like to note that Eddie Morales, Representative Morales, has joined us. Good morning. Do any members have any comments, brief comments, before we get started? All right, hearing none, then let's go ahead and get started. The Chair calls Keith Ingram from the Texas Secretary of State.
Howdy, my name is Keith Ingram. I'm the Director of the Elections Division at the Texas Secretary of State's office, and I am thankful for the opportunity to address the committee today. Appreciate it. The Secretary of State is the chief election official for the state of Texas. That's an important designation for various federal laws that we won't go into. But it means that she is responsible for obtaining and maintaining uniformity in the interpretation, application, and operation of the Texas Election Code and election laws outside of the Texas Election Code. However, the Secretary doesn't have a great deal of authority over local election officials. Texas is what's called a bottom-up state. We have most of our election work is done at the county level, and so that means that the voter registration roll maintenance is done at the county level, and it also means that the elections are administered at the county level. However, the Secretary serves the role of advice and assistance. So we issue advisories, we issue mass emails to give folks our interpretation of what the law is, and we also do quite a bit of training. We have annual seminars for county election officials, for cities, schools, and other political subdivisions, and then we've got an every other year conference that we do for party chairs as they get ready for the primary. So we do those, plus we do numerous web-based trainings throughout the year. As the calendar goes through different phases, we have web trainings that are appropriate to that part of the calendar. And so we try to anticipate what questions we get in the office and have a web training to address those questions. And we have had some success in decreasing the call volume because we've addressed them prophylactically. I did want to briefly talk about the 22 election. 2022, as you may know, was a year of challenges in the election world. SB 1 was passed in a second called session in 21, and that meant that it didn't go into effect until December 1st, and it was a fairly massive overhaul of Texas election laws, and so it required our office to modify everything that we use for training, all of our forms, all of the voter registration applications, and to do so in a very short runway before the primary election at the 1st of March. We had about 3 or 4 months to get all of that done. At the same time, the census was late, and that led to the counties having to be involved in redistricting at the same time that we were trying to train them about law changes in SB 1. It was the perfect storm. It was horrible. I never want to live that experience again. As a result, in the primary election, we were not as successful as we think we should have been with regard to mail ballot rejection rates. We had a rejection rate that was close to 13% in the primary, and that obviously is not acceptable. That's much beyond what we normally have, and we and the counties worked throughout the rest of the year to get that number down. By the May election, the uniform date for cities and schools, the rejection rate was down to about 5.5%. By the runoff primary, it was down under 5%, about 4.7%. And at the end of the year, in the general election, we were under 3%. So much more in the zone. We expect that that number will continue to improve as we go forward. However, there were other things that came out of SB 1, namely, for the first time, Texas has a procedure to correct mail ballot rejections. So if a person has their mail ballot rejected, they can correct whatever the problem is and still have that vote counted. And so we think that's a positive. We also have, for the first time, the ability to update voter registrations across county lines electronically. And so you can go to texas.gov and you can update your voter registration into a new county. And so we think that's a positive step as well. There was another bill, I was speaking earlier about the lack of authority in our office. There was another bill, SB 1113, that passed that does give us some oversight role into the voter registration list maintenance. And odd-numbered years are the years where list maintenance is our focus. And so as we go into this year, we have begun our oversight role with SB 1113, and we have had phenomenal success. The counties have the best voter registration rolls that they've had since I've been in this job for 11 years. We are in great shape as we go into the federal presidential election next year. And finally, I wanted to talk about our trainers. We've had great success with our election trainers. We have 6. Almost all of them are former county election officials, and they have given our office the ability to go to counties and train the local election officials up close and personal, and to get insight into early voting and election day that we've never been able to have before. We have asked in our LAR for more funding for more trainers because we've had phenomenal success. We've had them visit over 100 counties so far. Unfortunately, we've got a pretty good-sized gap in the Panhandle in West Texas, and we would like to hire somebody in that part of Texas to cover that area. And And I think that's all that I have. If y'all have any questions, I am happy to answer.
Members' questions? Representative Swanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ingram, thank you so much for your report and for always promptly returning phone calls to committee members. And we just appreciate your efforts for us to have good elections and honest elections, but also efficient elections, which seems to baffle the people running our elections in Harris County, but hopefully we can make some progress on that this time.
Okay.
As somebody from Harris County, I guess I can, talk about the real frustrations there. I wanted to go over some stuff we've talked about before. You did tell us in committee in the past that ES&S, which I believe is one of only 2 companies whose machines are certified in the state of Texas. Isn't that correct? No other company has gotten any certification recently?
I agree with that, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so there was an issue that we hear about a lot, that their machines cannot be kept from counting a ballot, an infinite number of times, the same ballot. And so you and I discussed that very recently, like what's going on there, and that it was requiring some of the paperwork procedures. The new reconciliation form we passed in SB 1 was helpful there and hopefully would catch any problems. But you were going to check, this was just a recent conversation, so I'm not finding fault, but you were going to check with your people who were working with the ES&S to see if any improvements had been made to where their machines would not be capable of counting the same ballot more than once.
Yes, and I have done so.
Okay, go ahead. We're all interested?
We're all hanging on the edge of our seat. So here, the thing is that Texas has had optical scan ballots in use for almost 40 years. We've used a version of optical scan ballots with precinct ballot scanners for a long time. And during all of that time, there is a provision in the election code, it's 122A 8, I believe, that says that a vote has to be prevented from being counted more than once. That any voting system certified for use in Texas needs to prevent a vote from being counted more than once. And all of our optical scan ballot systems until recently have had the capability of reading the same vote more than once. If you just isolate the ballot scanner by itself apart from the rest of the voting system, you can put the same optical scan ballot through the scanner more than once. And obviously, with the new equipment, you get an optical image of that scanned piece of paper, and so you know what the serial number is. And so if a ballot is scanned more than once, you would be able to tell it, and you'd be able to count the paper and fix the problem. Only recently has one voting system vendor developed a system that prevents the scanning of a ballot more than once, but all voting systems have been certified for use. And you say, how can that be? Because 122 of the election code says that a voting system has to prevent the counting of a ballot. It doesn't say that a ballot scanner has to prevent it. It says that the voting system has to prevent it. And our test here in Texas on voting systems is a functional test. And so we evaluate whether or not a voting system is proper functionally in Texas under Texas law. And so one of the legal requirements that it has to meet, obviously, is prevent a vote from being counted more than once. So voting systems have done that because there is a requirement that the vote be deposited into a locked ballot box. So if it goes through, as it goes through the scanner, it drops into a box, and that box has 2 locks on it during early voting, one that's held by law enforcement and one that's held by the election administrator. And then on election day, there's one key that's held by the election administrator. And so the fact that the system deposits the ballot into a locked ballot box and can't be retrieved prevents the vote from being counted more than once. And that has been sufficient in Texas elections for, again, almost 40 years. Recently, we've got a vendor that prevents the scanner itself from reading the ballot more than once, and so that's a security upgrade, and it's a potential selling feature that vendor can use with counties if it needs to. But also in Texas law, we have what's called the ballot and seal report. And so if there's a public counter on the machine, and there is, obviously the results tape, and at the end of the day, when you print the results tape, if it is more than 4 votes off from the public counter, then you have to recount those paper ballots at central count. You don't recount them on that scanner, you recount them at central count. So if there's a difference of more than 4 votes, then that has to be reconciled, and it's done so at central count. So there are mechanisms in place, obviously, to catch if a ballot is scanned more than once, and obviously the lock on the ballot box prevents any particular ballot from being scanned more than once.
Could I kind of elaborate on that? My
Surely.
understanding was that your people who actually do the technical certification of the machines were working with the ES&S to figure out whether there was some kind of way of improving that. Were you able to get any feedback on that?
We have recently, within the last couple of weeks, reviewed a new ES&S system. However, it still has the same ability or lack of ability.
Okay.
So they haven't upgraded it yet, but it's one of the things that they're considering for the future.
Okay, and again, if I could, along the same line, my understanding is, I've never voted on an ES&S machine, but you cannot actually read the names of who you voted for, is that correct?
No, that is not correct.
Okay, it does list them out, okay.
It does.
And so I know recently a resident of Texas who happens to be in the room brought me a sample ballot that had a QR code on it, and which I believe came from a Hart InterCivic machine. And the concern that many people had that he expressed was, how do they know what's in that QR code? Is that somehow being read, changing their ballot? And on each of the machines, what's on that ballot that could, do they both have QR codes? And if so, what are they using them for?
They all have barcodes. I don't know if they for sure have both have QR codes. They serve different functions. There's one function on the ES&S card that you put into the ballot marking device that pulls up your ballot style. And on the Hart machine, it applies the QR code in the ballot marking device, and you have to punch in the code to get your ballot style. But each of them use a QR code in scanning. I don't know if for sure if the Hart uses it or not. I think the Hart is an optical scan, and it does optical character recognition to count the votes, and the ES&S uses the barcode. But before the voter puts the ballot into the scanner, they can look at the ballot, and they can read in English that their choices were the way that they want them to be, and put it in. Obviously, there's a test of the machine before the election to make sure that the votes are rendered correctly. So it's called a logic and accuracy test, and it's done before every election to make sure that, and as part of the logic and accuracy test, as part of SB1, we now have to do a hash validation. A hash validation means that we check the fingerprint of the software that's being used to make sure that it is exactly the same software that was certified by the Election Assistance Commission in Washington and our office. And so only if it passes that fingerprint test do you go on to the rest of the logic and accuracy test. And logic and accuracy test simply test whether every vote for every candidate and every combination of candidates is recorded and tabulated properly. So we do that before the voting starts, we do it before counting starts, and we do it immediately following counting. So that machine is tested 3 times to make sure that the votes are accurately recorded. In addition, after the election, every county in Texas does a partial manual count. So it's 1% or 3 precincts, whichever is greater, and they check by hand to make sure that the English readable votes were accurately tabulated by the machine.
Okay, so the QR code on the Hart InterCivic is merely to pull up the ballot style?
That's what I think. I don't think
Okay.
they use it to count the votes.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Capriglione.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ingram, thanks for being here. Want to thank you and your office for all the hard work you did after we had passed those election bills and with all the redistricting. So it was a lot of effort on your part, and we appreciate it. And like Representative Swanson said, your office has always been great in returning our calls and even our constituents' calls. I wanted to talk a little bit about the rejection rate for the mail-in ballots. So who actually rejects the ballots? Is it at the county level that they're rejected, or do they work with the Secretary of State's office?
It is. It's the ballot board at the county that actually does it, and the ballot board is made up of members of both parties, and so they're the ones who actually make the decision as to accept or rejecting a mail ballot.
And so when you talked about, and it's obviously in the right trend of going from 13% to now less than 3%, that's actually the average across the state.
That's correct.
So does that mean that it's got to mean, right, that there's some counties that have higher than the average and some lower? Do you see anything in that kind of data to, I guess, are there some significant outliers in the rejection rates?
Yes, and I'd be glad to provide you the county-by-county breakdown if you'd like to see it.
I think I would, yes.
But yes, there are definitely outliers, and what that triggers to us is that we need to talk to that county to figure out what's going on. You know, are there voters missing the box more than other counties, or is their ballot board too active? What's going on that makes that rate either a 0 or 15%?
That's right. And maybe if it's a small county, it's just a statistical thing, but I would appreciate it if you get a chance to do
Sure.
that. Well, I have two more quick questions, but what are some of the reasons now that the ballots are being rejected? And I apologize, I know you don't have that data now, but I guess I'm envisioning some pie chart where, okay, 50% is because they forgot this or they didn't do that. Can you just go over some of the main reasons?
I don't know the breakdown at all. That would be a question to ask counties. But the reasons why a mail ballot can be rejected is because you didn't sign the carrier envelope, you didn't provide one of your ID numbers, or the witness didn't sign where they were supposed to. I mean, there are things that happen, especially whenever we do the May election and the primary runoff. They're pretty close together, and so sometimes the ballots get mixed up and put in the wrong envelopes, so those aren't counted. And so there's all those reasons for rejection that have always existed.
Sure. So some of it is they didn't fill out the form right. Or,
That's right.
And of course, it's probably because some people shouldn't get the ballot, right, in some cases. So I saw, I guess, the new version of what these mail-in ballots, at least with the new envelopes and all that kind of stuff. Do you think that will help address some of those concerns?
Well, we have a more updated version than the one you saw that actually has a red box around where you put the ID numbers. And so we think that helped in the November election. Also, the counties are putting an insert in their mail ballot materials that says, don't forget to put your number on here, and those are colorful. Some of them use yellow, some of them use purple, but something to get the voters' attention so that it's an extra, and it kind of is a smaller piece of paper, so it falls out separately. And
So we're highlighting some of what the main problems were, and that's helping educate the voters on.
there is also, because of SB 1, the opportunity to cure that mail ballot and to cure most of those ID problems online using our ballot tracker. And one of the things that the ballot tracker by statute requires that somebody use both their driver's license, their social security number, and their residence address. Putting the residence address in is keeping a lot of people out, so we would like to fix this access problem by having driver's license, social security, and then swapping out date of birth instead of residence, because that's easier for people to do. And we think we'd have higher success rate with the ballot tracker and with mail ballot corrections if that was changed.
That's great. All right, thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. Representative De Ayala, I think I got that right.
You say that better than my wife of 31 years. Well, a couple little questions. First of all, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Director Ingram. I think we're talking about this optical scanner. Which is the vendor that does have the technology not to scan it more than once? What's the name?
Hart.
Hart. Okay. And then second, and we met in another committee, I think, for the first time, and you said something there that kind of took me, I didn't think about it that way, and you said it again here today, and that is, although the Secretary of State has ultimately responsibility for elections in the state of Texas, their rights are limited.
Very little authority over elections, that's right.
You have a lot of stick and very little carrot, I think. One way to look at it. It's so.
First class, I'm not sure about that. Either one.
But again, we're seeing in elections here lately, the last couple of cycles, at least in the Harris County area, more issues happening, issues being a loose term. I don't mean to go into that in too much detail other than to say this. Countywide voting on election day is something that is relatively new. Not for early voting, but for election day, it's relatively new.
It's something that's been in Texas law since '07, so.
Right. But I think Harris County didn't implement that until sometime after that.
Agreed.
And I don't want to, but it seems like a lot of the problems we're seeing in Harris County we're seeing them on election day and with countywide voting. And kind of a general question is, does countywide voting in these large counties, and let's just put Harris County over here and focus on Harris County, is it becoming more problematic than prior to that, our traditional precinct voting on election day?
So as I said earlier, I've been in this job about 11 years, and Harris County has always had election issues. And the thing that I don't think the general public realizes is that elections are extremely large logistical enterprises. I mean, they are a logistical enterprise. And the county clerk before used to run the elections in Harris County, and Stan Stannert was an engineer by training, and he knew logistics and still had trouble sometimes on election day because it's just a massive project trying to put enough equipment in enough places so that everybody can vote on election day in Harris County. Harris County is just huge. Geographically, it's large. Population-wise, it's large. Traffic is bad. And so if something goes wrong and you got to get a technician to a polling place, there's just challenges. It's just hard. And that's with precinct voting. That's with countywide voting. Harris County is just difficult. And I definitely agree that when Harris County adopted the election administrator, their first election administrator didn't have any election experience. So she didn't have any real-world concept of the logistics involved and just how many challenges she was about to face. And as a result, some of the elections under that election administrator were some of the worst we've seen. There's just no question about it. The primary election in 22 in Harris County was bad. And as a result, the Election Commission made a change in election administrator. The new guy came in, Cliff Tatum, about 8 weeks before the election. And the November election had its challenges, and there definitely had logistical problems with ballot paper, if nothing else. But it was one of the best elections we've seen out of Harris County since Stan Stannert was the clerk. So they've made substantial improvement, albeit with continued issues. And I don't know that that has anything to do with countywide, or if it just has to do with the fact that Harris County has logistical challenges because of its size and traffic. Because Dallas County has been countywide for longer than Harris County, and they haven't had the issues that Harris County has, but it's not as big and it's not as populous. So there might be something different about Harris County, I think.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Busey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ingram, good to see you again. Thanks for being here. As Rep. Swanson said, thank you for how you and your office always work so well with all the members to answer questions and work for solutions. I have a few things I want to talk about. You've talked a little bit, but since we were just talking about countywide voting, can you talk about why we went to countywide voting, or why it was given as an option, what some of the reasons are?
I don't know. I wasn't in this business back in 07, 08 when it was done, but my belief is that the voters are used to being able to vote anywhere in the county during early voting, and so there was a desire to extend that to election day.
It's an access thing. We can vote anywhere.
Right.
Is there any major red flag you see to countywide voting? We have in Williamson County. I believe you're in Williamson County as well.
In Lubbock County has been doing it since the first election, and Williamson County uses all the big counties. We've got about 90 counties that use countywide voting. There are about 80% of Texas voters use countywide voting on election day. And there haven't been any consistent issues that are pointable directly to countywide voting.
Sure.
You know what I mean? There's some counties have an issue with whatever the problem is, but it's not attributable to the countywide.
Not to vote in countywide on election day. Thank you. Let me ask a few things. We talked about ballot by mail, some of the issues you talked about, if I'm correct, close to a 13% rejection rate in the primary. That went down, you said, to about 3% in the general. How does that compare to rejection rate pre-SB1?
It's still higher than pre-SB1 rates. Depending on the election, it could be anywhere from 2.5% to 1% in previous elections.
So maybe up to 2 times, 3 times the amount pre-SB1. What changed in SB1 that's leading to these Texas ballot voters getting their ballot rejected?
Again, like I said before, I don't know the reasons why the rejections are happening. We know what is put in there for a final rejection reason, so we could probably pull that statistic if you wanted to. I do know that statewide in the November election, there were 163 ballots that were rejected because they didn't have a social security number or driver's license number in the system.
Okay, well, good. I wanted to bring that up. So those reports about individuals not having one or the other or both, how many Texans are still in that situation?
You recall when we were talking about this last session that at that time there was about 1 million people that didn't have a driver's license number but did have a social, or that had the opposite. There was about 1 million of each. We, as of December, have that number down to 298,000 that have a TDL but no SSN in their record, and we have 369,000 that have the last 4 of an SSN at least, but nothing for the Texas driver's license. And we have 93,800 that have neither number.
So what does that mean for them when they're trying to vote by mail?
Well, for the ones that have one or the other, they should, use both, because they'll succeed if they have at least one of these numbers in their record. Mm-hmm. So what we've recommended that voters do, if they have any doubt at all, is to use both numbers on both their mail ballot application as well as their carry envelope. The ones that don't have either one in their voter record, they can add them using the Texas.gov voter registration system. And so they can add them electronically, or they can fill out a new voter registration application to add their numbers. We had people do both of those things in the election in 22.
So, in past years, we've heard a lot of talk about any ballot is too many, and you're telling me since SB1, the rate of rejection is up from 1% or so to 3%.
I agree with that.
And these are Texas voters being rejected for clerical reasons, mistakes on a ballot in general, usually.
Brian, and again, the reasons for rejection vary from not signing the carrier envelope to putting your ballot in the wrong envelope to sending an envelope back without a ballot to putting both your husband and wife's ballots in one envelope. I mean, there's other reasons for rejection besides the ID number.
When we think about stated intent of the bill that was passed last session, it was to keep our elections safe and secure but accessible. And I feel like if we've got such a significant increase still, then we need to go back and remedy some things to make sure these Texas voters don't continue to have their vote thrown out.
And now that we have a corrective action procedure, we can do some tweaking to that procedure to make it more accessible so that we can lower the rejection rate further. And one of the ways is to improve access to the ballot tracker.
Absolutely. And I think we're working on that. A few other things, and you can characterize it however you want, but there was this, my notes here call it a fight between AG and the counties over ballot preservation period. Last year, the Attorney General released a legal opinion reinterpreting the election code to allow members of the public access to voted ballots almost immediately after the election, even though the election code requires the ballots be sealed for 22 months. The previous Secretary of State opposed this decision in a letter to the Attorney General, saying that the handling of the voted ballots themselves opens up the possibility of accidental or intentional damage or misplacement that could call into question the election after the fact. Can you talk about that incident and what the concerns were from the previous Secretary of State with the Attorney General wanting to do that?
Sure. The letter you're referring to from us, there's the Attorney General, when they get a question, often they'll ask for briefing materials. Mm-hmm. That was the brief that we submitted. So obviously, the previous Attorney General back in 1985 had a different opinion, and believe that 66058 and its 22-month preservation period prevailed, and that these are public records, but on a timer, so they don't become public until 22 months. This Attorney General has a different opinion about that. We'll work with whichever way it goes. However, it does put county election officials in a difficult position because there is a criminal penalty for unauthorized access before 22 months. And now they've got an Attorney General opinion says that they have to access them in spite of that prohibition. So it puts the county election officials in a difficult place. It's my understanding there's some litigation pending to resolve that tension, and we'll await the outcome of that.
Has the AG's office responded to the Secretary of State's letter?
As I said, that letter was a brief that we submitted before the opinion was issued, and so their response was the opinion.
Just nothing else, just that opinion, the
That's right.
interaction. Has the AG done anything to address those concerns since y'all's letter about, needing to protect the county administrators with the 22-month?
No,
Okay. Nothing's happened from the AG.
that's right.
All right. That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Keith.
Thank you, Vice Chair BC. Representative Swanson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would have to differ that Harris County's election went anywhere close to better, and I don't know anyone in Harris County who would agree with you. We think it was an absolute disaster, and it's not just oops, we had a logistical problem when great numbers of polling places were not given enough paper for the ballots. They were only given a fraction of the number of pieces of paper that they needed. Keep in mind it takes two, as you know, because our ballot is so long, two pieces of paper to make a ballot for every voter in Harris County. And many locations were only given a fraction of the number that they needed based on the number of voters at that location in 2018. And when those election judges called in, many of them could not get anyone on the phone for 4 hours. And when they did, they still couldn't get ballots. And when one of the parties sent over a representative to say, please take these locations, more paper ballots, that person was thrown out and threatened that if they came back, they would be charged with trespass. And it is simply not acceptable. And I'm sure you've seen the map. If not, I'd be glad to get it to you. As major media, Houston Chronicle has carried this stuff. Most all of those locations were in Republican areas and not in Democrat areas. They were mostly in Commissioner Precinct 3, Commissioner Tom Ramsey's area. And to say things went well, I have listened and
Never
listened
did I
to
say it went well.
everything
Did I say it went well? I did not say that.
Excuse me, just one second.
I'm sorry, but I did not say
Mr.
that.
Ingram, hold on just one second. At this point, we're asking questions of the witness. I appreciate your passion, Representative Swanson, about that. Do you have a question for Mr. Ingram?
Yes, could you please justify what you said? Thank you.
I didn't say it went well. I said it was the best election since they've had an EA. That is a pretty low bar.
Okay.
Okay? So that's all I said. Don't take out of context or misread it was the best election they've had since they've had an EA. That is, again, a very low bar.
All right, thank you so much. Representative Manuel.
Hello, I have a quick question. I know that whenever they're doing the procuring of the ballots, a lot of times it's online temporarily. I know like in Jefferson County, it was like on a YouTube channel they were able to watch to see when they took ballots. But then after that, if you weren't able to watch it during that time frame, it was pretty much gone. What is the reasoning for that, I guess would be the main part of it?
So there was a new law that required the recording of central count and as well as the voted ballots until the canvass. And that required that all of that be live streamed and recorded. But the recording, according to the law, only has to be kept until the end of the calendar year. So the recording has to be available until December 31st, and then it doesn't have to be kept available. A county can keep it longer than that, but I think the concern was that storage of data costs money, and so that much video, it's about a month's worth of video, is quite a lot of data to store.
So you would have to be able to go to the county clerk's office to get a copy, or to view those videos is where you would go. Where would that be?
No, it should be publicly available until December 31st.
Okay.
But the issue is that after that, they don't have to make
They
it
don't have to
available.
keep it.
That's right.
Okay, but it would be, so if someone wanted to view that during that time frame, where would they go to look at those videos?
Different counties use different platforms.
So
Some of them
contact-
used Facebook, some of them used YouTube. So it just depends on where the county, what platform they used and where they stored it.
Okay, and if they're not storing them, what would be the correct way would be to, shouldn't say storing them. If for whatever reason, let's say they're, like we're using the YouTube is what was being used. If it's not being stored in that time frame, that's something that they should either reach out to the county, or would that be something that would be reached out?
No, you should definitely ask the county about that.
Okay,
And make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. It's only counties over 100,000 that have this
Yes,
requirement.
I'm one of those counties.
I understand that, yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative. Representative De Ayala.
Little bit of Harris County, but just one real quick one. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I understand it, and Representative Swanson was talking about, ballot paper, when you're voting countywide, you can go by some estimates, but we could have 50% of the population vote in 10% of the polling places. And so ballot paper, yes, we have historical numbers and we can guess, whatever. But the difference with the ballot paper is with precinct-based voting, on election day only, you have a finite number of paper, the maximum number of folks that are going to come in to vote, correct?
I agree with that, but there's also the countervailing thing that if a place runs out of paper, you can just go to the next place down the street. If you're in precinct voting and run out, you're limited to that option.
Yeah, but the odds of you running out are going to be so minuscule because you have a finite number of people that can vote there.
You shouldn't run out in countywide either. You should have enough supplied to not run out.
Well, we won't tread on that any longer. Thank you.
Yes, sir, Mr. Morales.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's talk about high school compliance. I've received some information with respect to the low number of high schools that actually perform what is required under current law with respect to at least twice informing the students that they're eligible to register.
Right.
Is that correct? Okay.
I disagree, though, with the statistic, so I didn't want to admit that part of your question.
Okay, great. And share with me your disagreement or why you believe that statistic is incorrect.
Because the group that puts out that statistic only uses one metric. The
Which
only
is?
metric they use is who orders voter registration applications from our office. Whenever we provide a PDF of the voter registration application to every single high school principal twice a year, so they can print as many as they want, not ask for them from our office and be in compliance with the law, but not get recorded by that group. Texas League of Women Voters did a survey, an actual on-the-ground survey of principals, and found that the compliance rate was much higher, close to 80%, and that they in fact used voluntary deputy registrars from the League of Women Voters as well as other mechanisms to comply with the law that were not ordering forms from our office.
Outside these agencies doing their own audits, is the Secretary of State interested in performing its own internal audit with respect to high schools to see what their input is? And get more accurate data directly from the principals?
We don't have the ability to do that. We have had secretaries who have emphasized the high school volunteer deputy registrar program and have solicited superintendents to commit to having 100% compliance in their districts, and that's probably something we will do again.
Tell me or explain to us why you don't have the necessary tools in place to perform that when you're able to send every principal the PDF of the voter registration card.
Because we have limited resources in our office. I've got 30 people for the whole state. There are 1,400 school districts. I don't know how many high schools there are, but I certainly don't have enough people to check with every high school.
So it's a manpower issue. You'd need
It is
more
very
personnel.
much a manpower issue, yes, sir.
Okay. And do you feel that this should be something on the list for us to address, or do you feel comfortable with respect to the Texas League of Women Voters and their data showing that 80% or more, to where it's not on your radar as an important issue?
What's important to address or not address is up to you guys. We will implement the laws as they are passed.
Do you have concerns over many complaints coming in or none coming in at the Secretary of State to address this issue to where it should be on your radar?
We don't get any complaints about the high school deputy registrar program, no, sir.
Okay. And there are no plans, because of your lack of personnel, there are no plans to actually perform your own internal audit and see where they perform at this time. It's more of a ledge issue, making sure that we give you the proper tools and the proper funding for you to get to that level.
I would agree with that.
I'd also like to ask you, I understand, as an example they gave me was Maricopa County in Arizona used processing paper for voter registration forms, and that was at a cost of 83 cents. I understand that compared to the average of 3 cents of applications were received electronically from DMVs. Do you disagree or agree with those rough numbers? They don't have to be exact, but 83 cents compared to, that's paper, compared to electronic at 3 cents.
Sure, I would agree that it would be a cost savings to have more electronic registrations. However, most of the registrations that we have in Texas are electronic.
What percentage of that?
By a factor of 10 more electronic than one paper.
And that's handled through the local county registrar's office or through the Secretary of State?
So there's two ways that people can update their voter registration or register to vote electronically. Whenever they have a driver's license transaction on the web, that presents a simultaneous opportunity to update your registration or to register for the first time. That is by far and away most of the registrations that we get in our office. The second way is texas.gov. It says that if someone is already registered in a county, they can go and update their registration into a new county electronically using texas.gov system.
Great. What about, can you share any information as far as how much Secretary of State spends annually on paper voting registration currently?
I don't know that number. I know that in election years, it's as much as 600,000, but I don't know precisely. I'd have to go ask our budget folks.
Is that something that you can provide to the members here
Sure.
after you get?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I have one or two more questions. My information shows, with respect to that, before I move on, that there'd be some cost savings of close to $1 million. And that from a fiscal conservative standpoint, I'd like to see where that data is, at least for, let's say, the last 5 years on the expenditures, and see if that's something. Maybe by saving there, we can provide you the personnel so that we can perform some of these internal audits. That's where I'm coming from, sir.
Okay.
And lastly, I understand there was a risk limiting audits that were approved under Senate Bill 598 from the last legislative session. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, sir.
It included at least 5 counties that needed to go through that audit process in the November election. Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
And can you tell this committee which counties participated in the pilot program following November's election?
There were actually 7. I don't remember them all off the top of my head.
Is that?
But it was Tarrant, it was Travis, Bastrop, Hayes. I'm going to forget some. Cameron. I'll have to get you the full list.
That's something that you can provide to the members, please?
Sure. We're going to issue a report and send it to the committee as well, and it'll have an appendix with each county's experience in it.
So I understand under the Senate bill, the results, then the publication of those results needed to take place within 3 days of the completion of the audit. So does that mean the audit has not been completed?
That's the final audit in 26. What we were supposed to do in 22 was a pilot program, so it's not the final required audit statewide.
Okay. Has the data from that pilot project been completed now?
Yes.
Yes? And do you have an estimated date of when, is that also going to be published on
It's
your
in the
cert?
report, yes, sir. It's coming soon.
Do you have an estimated date?
I don't as I stand here today, but I think it's next week, but
Awesome. Great.
it's soon.
When that is published, is it something that you can provide to the, like a link to that website?
Absolutely, we're going to send it around to all of y'all.
Is there any particular information from that audit that you can share with us as far as what you were able to uncover or find, or any pros and cons that you were able to?
The headline news is that Texas is complicated. And so it's going to be a complicated thing to put RLAs in place statewide. That's the headline news. It's going to be a project.
In addition,
We might have to next session ask for more time. I don't know if 26 is going to be doable. I know that the first time they did it was in Colorado, and it took 6 years lead time for them to do it. We've been given less time than that, and Texas is a lot more complicated and less homogeneous than Colorado.
now, will the audit also provide with certain recommendations at the end or conclusions from the Secretary of State?
That's what the report is supposed to contain. I don't know if we've got enough information yet to issue any firm recommendations, but definitely the pilot report that we're supposed to issue is supposed to have those in it. They're going to be tentative at this point.
Thank you, sir, for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Morales. If there's no other questions, Mr. Ingram, thank you so much.
Thank y'all.
For your time. Appreciate you.
Appreciate it.
The chair would call Rebecca Hibbs from the Texas Department of Public Safety.
Good morning, Chairman, members. My name is Rebecca Hibbs. I'm with the Texas Department of Public Safety Driver License Division.
Thank you, ma'am. Before we get started here, would you do me a favor? Is that on? I can kind of.
That's a good question. Can you hear me now?
I think
I'll
I
just
can hear
step closer to it.
you. Yeah.
Does that help?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Again, my name is Rebecca Hibbs. I'm with the Texas Department of Public Safety Driver License Division.
And you're testifying on behalf of that department? Is that
Yes,
right?
sir, I am.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. As you know, the department is a designated voter registration agency, and voter registration services are provided by the Driver License Division. We provide multiple opportunities for a customer to complete a voter registration application. First, if a customer visits a driver license office, the application for a license or identification card does include the opportunity to register to vote. If they're eligible and they answer their question is yes, that's entered into our driver license system. The driver license system does allow a voter registration application if the person is a U.S. citizen and their age is at least 17 years and 10 months. Beginning in September of 2020, we also allowed customers who complete their transactions online or by telephone to complete voter registration questions. And again, the same eligibility was required for an in-office transaction. Voter registration information from those online and telephone transactions are sent nightly from the Texas.gov portal to the driver license system. Finally, we also provide voter registration when a customer either mails in their address change or does a mail-in renewal with us. At the end of every day, all voter registration applications that are in the driver license system for that day are then sent to the Secretary of State's office. We also provide all of our new employees training on the voter registration application process, and we also provide refresher training to our tenured employees. So that's basically the process for the driver license office. I'm available for any questions if y'all have them.
Representative Busey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Hibbs. I've got a few questions. What is the current total number of people who have used the DPS online database to register to vote online as part of a driver's license transaction?
I do not have that number. I know that it had been over 1 million not too long ago, but let me check that and I can provide that information.
I thought, if I remember correctly, I thought they reported it was close to 1 million 2 years ago, right? When
Yes,
we first started the program. And so I assume it's significantly up. We'd love to have that information. My next question was going to be if you had it by year or by month. And so if y'all have whatever you can do to give to us, that'd be helpful to know.
Yes, absolutely.
How
I
many
believe
people are taking advantage of this option?
Absolutely. I believe that's similar to what we provided to you previously. So yes, we will absolutely go back and update that and provide it to the committee.
I know at last session, the program was still pretty new 2 years ago. But at the time, as they were approaching 1 million users through the online voter registration portal, it was reported by DPS that the system was working without complications. Is that still
Yes,
the
sir.
status of the online portal?
That's correct.
Do y'all do any advertising to promote this, that people know this is available? Is there any budget from kind of like outreach to just make sure Texans know that they can do the online voter registration?
The Department of Public Safety doesn't have anything other than we make it available like through our online application and our website, but we don't do any advertising as far as mailing or notifications or press releases.
You know, I would assume now, since it was close to a million people 2 years ago, we're probably in the millions that have used the online portal to register to vote. I mean, bigger than many, many states. We have people registering online in the state of Texas. You know, I have a hope that this committee, since we know, has reported that it's going without complications, will hopefully continue to extend this to the last few Texans that don't have access, those that are new residents of the state or just becoming 18 years of age, and make sure everyone has this online voter registration option that's safe and secure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. Any other questions? Mr. Day? No other questions? Well, you got easy.
I did compared to Keith. That was nice.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. The chair calls Chris Davis from the Texas Association of Elections Administrators. For the record, Mr. Davis, you are Chris Davis, and you're testifying on behalf of the Texas Association of Elections Administrators. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Proceed.
Again, Chris Davis, Williamson County Elections Administrator, testifying, as the chairman said, on behalf of TAEA, the Texas Association of Election Administrators. Thank you for inviting us today to testify for the committee at this organizational meeting. As the subject matter experts, we welcome the opportunity to inform the committee as to our processes, as well as welcome the opportunity to collaborate with all stakeholders as it relates to successfully managing voter registration and administering elections. I believe a hard copy of our priority, both the TAEA and the County and District Clerks Association of Texas, priority one sheet has been passed out to all of you. But before I kind of touch on those, I want to talk about our main priority. And our main priority as county election officers is essentially to carry out what was asked of us in 2021 with the bills and the laws that were passed, the laws that were created, to the best of our ability and where it's applicable and actually doable. To that end, touching on briefly some of the priorities on our sheet, we wanted to talk about what we are calling, what others have called, we didn't come up with the name, the worm, the Write Once, Read Many, is actually a feature or a part of Senate Bill 1 that we struggled, frankly, to explain our concerns during the sessions, regular and special, when it was drafted. And I think it's over time we've been able, and I believe the Secretary of State's office and others have been able to convey our concerns of what the text of the letter of that part of the bill was requiring. And essentially it was requiring a heavy investment statewide on the outset and then regularly ongoing $116 million up front, biennial costs of close to $40 million for counties, all 254 counties in Texas, to purchase equipment that doesn't yet exist from either of the two vendors, the voting equipment vendors that have been discussed today that are certified to sell voting equipment in Texas. We have seen some promising drafted legislation that we hope makes it before the committee to address the situation and assure the committee and the legislature that we believe the intent of protecting media that is used in voting systems is already part of the current spec or specification of certified equipment, and we hope to discuss that in more detail when and if these bills make hearings. We also, as had been discussed by the Secretary of State and Keith Ingram, the Elections Director, in terms of ballot by mail and the effects of SB 1, we are always looking to see how we can address the learning curve of the new requirements for absentee voters and how we can give them more expanded opportunity to correct defects that they may have in their absentee ballot, in particular their carrier envelope. Whether that is an extension of time allowed for early voting ballot boards to meet. As of now, they're not able to meet as early as, say, Signature Verification Committee. We are seeking perhaps the ability for early voting ballot board members to begin to meet earlier than what they can, if not 30 days out before an election day, perhaps the very beginning of early voting, to process what we see as ballot by mail envelopes that may need addressing or special attention and corrective action. We are also seeking perhaps the ability to retain that actual carrier envelope that contains a ballot and be able to send voters that need to correct defects a document that they can manually fill out, complete, sign, and mail back to us. From our county, when there was an earlier discussion this morning of rejection rates, we typically see more rejections the closer we get to the deadlines for voters to turn in their mail ballots. Because now there are counties that are trying to return those ballots by mail to those voters for corrective action, and then hope that the Postal Service is having a good day, both going to the voter and getting that ballot back to our offices by deadline. If we can retain those ballots and those envelopes containing those ballots, securely containing those ballots, I might add, and send out some kind of a form, a corrective action form, that has fields that the voter can complete, attest to, and mail back to us, we see a potential for a market increase in accepting more ballots when it comes to those hard and fast deadlines. The last concern that we wanted to touch on is, and this is of course, post-Uvalde tragedy, is the threat of counties losing school campuses, high school, elementary school campuses as polling places. Our organizations, the County District Clerks Association of Texas and TAEA, have put forth informal surveys to our counties to ask how many of their polling places, chiefly election day polling places, are on these kind of school campuses. And we received back numbers in the 40% of election day sites, all the way to the 60% of all election day sites being on school campuses. Harris County, Representative Ayala, I think, is one that has over half of election day sites on school campuses. Bexar County was another one that comes to mind. Those urban counties, those heavily populated counties, really rely on school campuses as polling places because they are public buildings. They already generally address the ADA and accessibility concerns in a disability sense. They're also accessible in a traffic or commuter sense. They're on thoroughfares where voters can, wherever they're going to work, drop their children off at school, come back from work on the way to the grocery store, stop by these convenient locations because they're public buildings. The code currently requires that the custodians of those buildings make them available to us. However, we do have member counties whose school districts have said they don't want to participate as polling places anymore. And to a county election officer, we typically don't want to press the issue. We don't ever want to put voter accessibility above student safety. So what can be done about that? And when we see some of the bills that are being introduced, removing polling locations, we don't know if, public campuses as polling locations. We don't know if an in-service day on Tuesday of Election Day is a possibility. We think it may have a double-edged benefit of also making those those locations safer. And for high school campuses, maybe even allowing or kind of jump-starting the student election clerk program, where students at high schools that are age 16 or older can actually serve as clerks in elections at those campuses or elsewhere near perhaps where they live. They can get paid for it. They could possibly get school credit for it. I think it would look great on college resumes. So we're hopeful that there may be solutions before some kind of wholesale prohibition of school campuses being used as polling places. Generally, with SB 1, we think it went far in creating opportunities for enhanced security and enhancing transparency. And we ask the committee, before they consider other bills that may go even a step further, to, like, say, a fine wine, let SB1 breathe a bit, let counties adjust, let the voters in those counties really get used to the provisions that were passed in SB1. There are quite a few counties, I think it was addressed, that have the video streaming and recording process. And we want to promote that, to let voters know that when ballots come in for almost a whole month period, and in my county, we have 6 video streams going on in a 1 month period, so it's a lot of video footage. If someone was inclined to, they could sit and they can watch where we store our media, where we store our absentee ballots, where we store the things that contain voters' results all the way to canvassing. In that vein, we will be here. For those that have served on the committee before, they may be glad to hear we will have different faces representing TAA coming to testify before the committee from week to week. This is my 4th session doing this. But we will all be available, and we will be available in your districts as well to answer questions that you may have. And I'm here to answer any questions that the committee have.
Representative De Ayala.
I'll be brief. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here. And I'm one of the rookies on this committee, so bear with me.
Welcome, sir.
As I stumble a bit. You were talking about these elementary schools. Have there been any incidents of concern, violence on Election Day or during elections? I don't think I heard that in your testimony.
In terms of coinciding with these campuses being open as polling places?
Correct.
Not to my knowledge, sir, but I would defer to statewide agencies.
I haven't heard any either. You bring it up. One of the premises for that would be we've had some incidents or something happened to make that a concern. That is for some folks to want to say, let's not hold elections at these public schools. But you haven't heard of any.
I have not, no, sir.
Okay. Neither have I. So, one. The second thing is there's, in some counties, we won't name names, there have been concerns about this 80. There have been concerns, and there's some fairly brand new elementary schools that were built within the last decade. You know, several $1 million worth of construction. You would think would be ADA compliant, but they're being excluded somehow by not being ADA compliant in some nuanced way. Is that something that you guys take a look at as an organization, or is that just on a county-by-county basis?
It's something that we're always mindful of, Representative Diala, and it's something that Secretary of State makes sure that we're mindful of in their annual seminars, and they actually invite groups and organizations like Texas Disability Rights, individuals that are able to offer services to the counties to kind of give a small let's not get excited, audit of polling places as it relates to handicap accessibility. I'm not aware, that's interesting that current and recent construction of schools may be lacking in that vein, but the state and counties and our associations, matter of fact, and the education efforts that we have doubled down on in these last couple of years stress the importance of accessibility in that sense, in that disability sense, for polling places.
And one kind of last question on that is, when it comes to making voting more easier for the voter, is it important to have polling locations that are consistent election after election?
Absolutely, it is. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Be they election day, be they vote centers, be they early voting.
In certain areas of a certain county we will not name, if you could pass that along to the election administrator there, I'd appreciate it.
We'll do our best to do that with all our members. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Busey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Davis, thank you for making the long drive from Williamson County to be with us today. We've heard, there's been congressional talk, we see it, about increased threats to our election officials and workers. Seems like a lot of kind of intensity around elections lately. Are you or anyone across Texas feeling threats? Are y'all receiving threats as election administrators, election workers? Is there abnormally growing and increasing?
Thankfully, Representative Busey, we are aware of, a couple of counties that, Tarrant County EA, Hyder Garcia, has testified several times on the very, very real threats that he received as an EA. And I'm hard-pressed to determine what the basis of those are, because I don't think there's anything that he did or didn't do. He was one of those stellar counties that was a beacon of compliance, transparency, execution, and the audits that the Secretary of State's office have convened. So in terms of real or physical security threats, we're not aware of very many. That's not to say, though, the stress level of administering elections, both on the county election officers level and staff, is more palpable now than I can remember it being, and I defer to those that have been doing elections longer than I have, only been doing it for 10 years. We've had whole county election offices resign en masse. I think Gillespie County is one, and I think that's a county that's still struggling to replace that staff. To that end, we're trying to lean forward. We think there's an opportunity here to focus on the transparency. We think there's an opportunity that's already been kind of addressed also when it comes to the education of poll watchers. That was part of SB1 that was passed last year. We think county, statewide, county election offices have seen, I'm surprised, kind of an improvement in the general behavior and tone of poll watchers. They now know to kind of observe more than intervene in polling locations, central count stations. They are more apt to actually determine what is regular and irregular, or know who to ask before wanting to stop the presses, so to speak, at a polling place. Those kind of things contributed to the stress levels and the execution of election administration, both at the polling place and the central count before. So that education of the poll watcher that the state, Secretary of State's office conducts, we think we've seen it already bear fruit. The education that we are trying to give to our members and to our counties, be they county clerk counties or election administrator counties, we hope will go a long way to allaying the concerns that members of the public may have in how we conduct elections, how we can be more transparent, how we can pull back the curtain, if there is a curtain, to reveal how we conduct our processes. The Texas Association of Counties has collaborated with the two associations here today in education academies that we are conducting on a quarterly basis. Speaking as the Texas Association of Election Administrator co-legislative chair, we would love to see perhaps required or mandated continuing education for EAs like already exists for county clerks, tax assessor collectors, the various other county department heads or elected officials. I think it would make clear that counties need to budget for it, and it would go a long way in recognizing and us providing an avenue to collaborate and communicate about what our needs are and what the voters' needs are in terms of confidence in an election.
I appreciate that. I was going to ask if you thought the training was having an impact, and it sounds like you think it is.
Yes, sir.
Let me ask you about a provision in SB1, the prohibition of the use of non-rewritable media. I think specifically including ballot scanners, data storage devices, tabulating machines. It's estimated that complying with this will cost $116 million to replace equipment, ongoing costs of $37 million every biennium. Given the cost of complying with this law by purchasing new equipment every election is prohibitively expensive, and that the technology required to fully comply with this provision does not yet exist, are you aware of any additional solutions to meet this requirement in the law?
We are aware of bills that have been drafted that essentially point to what is already in the specification of state, federal, and state, Texas state certified equipment that focus on the fact that if attempts at tampering or modifying the contents of this kind of media are attempted, then the contents of that media become unreadable. Unreadable to a bad actor, unreadable to us as county election officers, at our polling place, or excuse me, at our central count stations where we're actually collating and collecting the results. And if we can all agree that that addresses the concerns for whoever may have put this into SB 1 at a very, very confusing and active time at the end of regular session and special sessions in 2021, we think it would work for us and avoid the fiscal impact numbers that you quote.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand, based on what you just said, if it's even necessary to have this provision in SB 1 or where it came from or why.
It's a really good question. It's certainly, for us to scramble, and so many counties have relatively recently purchased new equipment, when the requirement to go to a paper-based solution, there were several counties that availed themselves of the 100% reimbursement for equipment. And to have those counties, let alone the others that have already thought they were good to go for the next 10 to 15 years, that's typically the life cycle we see for voting equipment, to have to double down again is concerning.
Appreciate it. Let me ask you, switching gears just quickly to wrap up, Mr. Chairman. We talked about the county that shall not be named, Harris County, a lot already. I assume that will continue throughout this session. Can you elaborate a little bit on what's going on there? I know there's ongoing legal and investigation and stuff, but some of the challenges we've heard about on behalf of, association, what are these challenges with paper? How do we remedy it? Is there anything you can add to the Harris County conversation?
I'm not sure, Representative Busey, there's much I can add to what Keith Ingram already said. Part of it is a scale and a size issue. I don't think, personally speaking, an issue is that the principle of vote centers themselves or countywide voting themselves, because they're just one of 90 counties that Keith said that conduct countywide polling places. And the other 89 have done it successfully, regularly successfully. And if we really, really want to think about it, I'd make an argument to the committee that early voting, the practice of early voting in elections is itself kind of countywide, where any voter can vote at any location during the early voting period in person. And that's being practiced in 254 counties. And I think it's being practiced pretty well. In our largest elections, you'll see the overwhelming majority of voters, sometimes by a factor of 3 or 4, are voting in person and early voting, and that 25% of in-person voters are voting on election day. So voters being able to vote where it's convenient to them and not just being pigeonholed to one location, I think we've proven in 253 or 54 counties in early voting and in 89 of 90 counties on election day that it works. I hope that representatives from the Harris County are going to be available to both this committee and the Senate committee to answer the questions that you have for them, and we encourage the officers to reach out to them. We are encouraging them to participate with us in our regular legislative chair meetings, but stressing that as we've been put in the unenviable position in past legislative sessions to answer for why they did or didn't do something, we would love for them to be able to do that. You could hear it from the horse's mouth.
And I just want to make sure that this committee is working in a proactive way to help our biggest county and help all Texans. We, instead of pointing the finger and accusations, but coming up with solutions to make sure everybody continues to have great access to the ballot box. As far as the school situation, I have a bill to make Election Day a state holiday, so maybe we could make sure we keep our schools accessible. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Representative Manuel and then Representative De Ayala. And I think I got both those right. Did I not? Do you have any questions? Oh, I thought you did. Okay, yes, Representative De Ayala.
Okay. You bring up a good point. Early voting has been countywide for a long time. But when you have, and a little bit of hyperbole, but when you have a really bad event, a horrible event, a technical logistical disaster in early voting, there's always another day. There's always election day. The effects of incompetence, incompetence being, pure negligence or otherwise, can have some level of remedy because you have more time. on election day, when the wheels fall off, like they did this last election cycle in Harris County, and the phones are shut off and no one can find anyone and no one can get paper. And I don't want to belabor the point, but you can't fix that. There isn't another day. There isn't another time. It's a permanent mess up. And that's why I always look at early voting very differently than I do election day. And sometimes, you know, you hear the phrase too big to fail. Harris County is too big to fail on election day. So I say that because they've been given an opportunity to fix this a couple of times, and a new big problem seems to come every time. And it's a really big deal because of the effect of the confidence of the folks in this state. Because what we want at the end of the day, we want our elections to be, hey, we're the best in the country and this country is the best in the world. We've always been that. We just want to maintain that so we don't have any more of this other shenanigans or mistrust in elections. We all want that. And that's all we're trying to accomplish. So kind of back to Harris County, and I'll ask a question, is that's why the election day countywide voting, if it's not done right, and these smaller counties can probably do it better because it's easier to manage logistically. But in Harris County, just the spread and the breadth of it geographically and in terms of numbers of voters, we just can't allow that to fail again because it's having a significant effect on the psyche of the voter in Harris County. And that's what I'm hoping to make some progress on this session to rectify some way or another. That said, please pass on these comments to your colleagues in that county we will not name.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Representative Yala, we share those goals that you have for that county and for all counties. And again, I would hate for the Harris County individuals to try to explain the way we do things in my county, and I wouldn't want to be in that position to explain how they do in theirs, and I know you all understand.
I'm not asking you.
Yes, sir. But please keep in mind, it's not just medium to small counties that are successfully conducting countywide polling place program on election day. Dallas, I think Dallas, in terms of registered voters, that's probably half or a little bit more than half of Harrison County. It's no mean feat to successfully pull off vote centers and countywide polling place in Dallas County, Tarrant County, Collin, Denton, Travis, El Paso, Hidalgo, and little old Williamson County. That's probably the 11th largest in the state. I think, again, I can't disagree with what Mr. Ingram said. It's a size and scale issue, and I think the decisions, I hope that there's lessons learned on how to deal with that size and scale issue. Lord knows they have more resources, funding, and personnel than any of the other counties that are conducting elections. We'd be envious to have a fraction of what they have. But we will do our best to be both communicative to them and encouraging them to stand before here at the podium.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Is that everything? Thank you. Mr. Manuel.
Hi, I have at least one quick question. How difficult, and you may have answered this because I did have to step out, how difficult is it for you guys as the entire state as a whole when we try to fix the elections when it consistently changes for you all county by county, would you say?
It'd be much harder if we didn't have a partner in the Secretary of State's office to keep us abreast of those changes. It's really, really hard. The changes themselves, in my opinion, and forgive me, folks that have spoken before me or after me may disagree, the changes themselves aren't as hard as when those changes are implemented and made effective. And of course, we all know elections was kind of, to quote Reggie Jackson, the straw that stirred the drink last 2021. And some of these laws became effective at an incredibly late period of our election cycle. So the timing of those changes, in my opinion only, sir, is almost as impactful, if not more, than the actual content of the changes. And I know the Secretary of State's office and counties had to struggle for the hundreds of forms that had to be completely rewritten from the ground up, the processes that we had to really think of and change the airplane engine while in flight almost because of our 2 or 3 month run up to an election. The timing of the law and when it was effective is almost as impactful as the content of the legislation.
Okay, so, and this is just me asking, so would you say, and I'm not going to pick on Harris County, I'm going to add my county into it because we had our own separate issues, because we have a lawsuit in our county because of things that have happened. Would you say that because of the timing, that could have also contributed to some of the negative effects that we've had with people in voting lately? Because of when they went into place or how they were rolled out, could that have also impacted making things not run as smoothly as they possibly could have?
I think I understand what you're asking.
I'm not asking you to.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I think the first cut is the deepest. The first election is the hardest. You saw the rejection rates. They were the highest at the first election, the first time that voters had to be accustomed, and the county election offices, frankly, had to get used to the regulations. So I apologize if I'm not properly answering your question, but we're adjusting, we're learning as we're executing, and we're adapting with the state's help. Counties are, and learning from our mistakes, and we think we've shown that. And as much as there's counties that have particular problems, and maybe this is an offline conversation, Representative Manuel, we'd love to know who those counties are and how both the association can help, the Texas Association of Counties can help, and the Secretary of State's office can all help to collaborate, because we're not 254 islands any longer. We know that. And whether they're the largest county in the state or the smallest county in the state, we want to learn from each other.
Okay, so I'll guess, because I'm not trying to put you in any kind of awkward position. So would you say then possibly, and I just want to see if I'm understanding you correctly, it's always difficult having to change new system and catching up and making sure that people within the county are understanding how they properly should be handling elections, how they should be properly making sure that mail-in ballots are being procured correctly, making sure that the citizens know exactly what they can and cannot do based upon whatever the laws are. Would you say that it's still a process, like you said, of learning, and there could be difficulties rolling out anything that would be new if we're consistently adding new things, or even if we're changing something that is kind of baked into Texas voters' minds?
Yes, sir, I would say that. It's a process of learning. It's also a process of listening. We want to listen to lawmakers, and we hope that the lawmakers can listen to both the association and their district's county election officers. Chairman Smith, I assure you, we went straight to the two Tammys in your district, and we are making sure, and they have already been involved with lawmaking and collaboration with us, but it's not just because it's the chairman's representatives. We're all stakeholders, and not just county election officers, but voters, poll watcher groups, League of Women Voters, the parties themselves. We want to listen, and we want to come to kind of solutions together.
Okay, thank you. That's just what that's what I want to know. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Morales.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, I represent Alpine, which is in Brewster County, and the judge and the elections officer reached out to me. I think that issue has been addressed. I just wanted to put it on your radar, just in case I have follow-up questions or my staff. They initially thought that they were going to undergo a huge equipment purchase and costs associated with it for the next election cycle. I'm reading some of the information that's provided. This is you all, right?
Yes, sir.
Of the cost associated with the equipment, for voting equipment. But I understand that either they're exempt or they don't have to go through that expense at this time. So I think that's been addressed because they didn't have the funding for it. But I may have some follow-up questions. So just want you to have that in your radar in case after this meeting we have to follow up. Second, my two biggest counties in my district are Mayagüez County, which is my hometown, and Valverde County, which is only 50 minutes away. Neither one of them have county-wide elections. And I'm wondering, what do those county election officials need to do with you in order to get that process going? Is it you or the Secretary of State that they must start working with to get ready for that next voting cycle?
Thank you, Representative Morales. Ultimately, it's the Secretary of State that will give them the guidance. We can show them the documents, the kind of templates that counties have used that have successfully entered and continue to participate in the vote center or the countywide polling place program. But ultimately, it's the state that would give them the guidance and give, I believe, them the approval to do so. Of course, in my counties, you know, the county leadership, county commissioners court is active in it. In my county, I think in 2012, 2013, we had a bunch of stakeholders. So there were voting rights groups, public voters, the two parties, county leadership, the elections office. So the more folks that you can have at the table to discuss the pros and cons. It may not work for, and forgive me, I'm not advised as to the actual size and registered voter population of your counties in your district, but it may not work for all counties. We like that it's permissive and not prescriptive.
So I'd like to have those discussions, and if you can share any data with my office, with similar data that you would have sent somebody, let's say like Maverick County or Valverde, just reaching out to you to see like, we're interested, we'd like to start those discussions. What type of data would you provide them with to see the pros and cons? And also see the numbers, because I understood from either you testifying or somebody else that this countywide elections represent a huge portion of the total election.
In terms of the electorate, the voters, yes, sir. I believe
Votes,
it was
yeah.
80%?
Yeah.
That's what it said. Yes, sir.
And so I'm wondering why and I can understand, it's always a funding issue, but I'd like to see if I can facilitate that for any of the counties within my district that are interested in going that route.
We're happy to help, sir.
Thank you. No more questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. I have a couple questions. And yes, if the Tammys aren't happy, no one's happy.
We'll keep that in mind, sir.
Appreciate you mentioning that. You heard Mr. Ingram's testimony with regard to mail-in ballots earlier, and, you know, we had this egregious invalidity rate at 12 or 13%, and now we're at 3%. And then I heard your testimony about, which was well taken a moment ago, about trying to make sure that we allow SB1 to bake in to our processes. With regard to this mail-in ballot, I had an opportunity the other day, I don't vote mail-in, but I had an opportunity the other day to lay eyes on that thing, okay? And, you know, I'm getting to be a pretty old guy, but, you know, I still have some eyesight, and I just could not see that thing. And I can see why we probably had major issues with the mail-in ballots. And does your opinion about not making many changes on SB1 for this particular legislative cycle still apply to the mail-in ballots? Or do you think there are things we need to do?
In the execution or in the processes, absolutely, sir. Chairman, we believe that we can always improve on those processes. What is contained on the exterior of an envelope as to compared to what we could possibly include on the inside of an envelope. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying don't change anything in SB1. I'd probably be dismissed summarily as the legislative chair of TAA if I did say that. No, absolutely not. But we're here to execute SB1, but also recommend those changes that we think won't change the intent of the body that passed it.
Gotcha.
It would just work for all stakeholders, both voters and our offices.
Thank you. So in connection with mail-in ballots, then, what suggestions do you make? Is that something that we have time for here today? Is
Yes,
that something
sir.
you need to come by and talk to me about?
If only I would have included the envelope and probably a free pair of CVS readers for everyone and the text on them to pass out, because you're right, sir, the text on there, we have challenges with the Secretary of State's offices. Who can identify spare space on the envelope and how we provide all those things that are necessary? Perhaps some kind of consolidation of language is required. We'd all have to take a look at that and have those kind of conversations. But we think some of the things can be included perhaps inside of the envelope while still maintaining the security of that envelope and not being present on the outside, because it's clear that just years of accumulation of laws have had the effect of just more and more text has just been additive, and there hasn't been any kind of consolidation of that process. So that's one. Yes, sir.
What else do you have?
Well, again, as I mentioned earlier, allowing those ballot boards, those bipartisan ballot boards, more time to process what has become, we'd all agree, a more complex document, that envelope. Now it's got numbers that we've got to compare. And we hope that that learning curve, the voters that had to adjust to it, that were already absentee voters, yeah, they had to learn. And I mean, so many folks were still sitting in signatures and and just ignoring those numbers on their envelope. Given that it's 2 now, we want the voter has to pick correctly if they're only putting 1 number on that envelope. We're trying to encourage them to err on the side of caution, put both your numbers, driver's license and social security number. The recommendation that the Secretary of State's office had to tweak their online ballot by mail portal to make it easier for voters to check where they are in the stages of acceptance in submittal of the ballot envelope and what's correct or what's not correct. Logging in with the residence address, as it's now required, is very, very tricky because they put in AVE for avenue, ST for street. Putting in a date of birth that would help with their first and last name identifying, we think, would clear a significant hurdle. And take it from the Secretary of State's office. They're the one who's administering that portal, and they see and they hear about those error rates of people just not being able to access the portal and use it for what it was intended, correcting these defects.
I'm just still picking your brain. Any other suggestions?
Is there one that I'm missing that I need to hit on that you have in mind, sir?
No,
Yes,
I just
sir.
want to make sure you
I mean,
have full opportunity.
the time is probably as big as anything, as well as the form, and because we did it. I mean, counties, with the limited time that we had, we made it happen in those primaries of 2022, but it wasn't easy. And county offices lost some really, really good people that just said, yeah, they didn't sign up for this, the stress and the amount of time that was needed to change, like I said, a plain engine in mid-flight. We hope it's going to improve.
Members, any other questions? Mr. Davis, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Chairman Smith. Thank you, committee.
The chair now calls Heather Hawthorne. Ms. Hawthorne, for the record, you are Heather Hawthorne, am I correct?
I am Heather Hawthorne.
And you're testifying on behalf of the County and District Clerks Association of Texas, is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, thank you very much.
Well, I was going to say good morning, but it's now afternoon. So I am Heather Hawthorne. I'm the Chambers County Clerk. I represent about 121 county clerks that still conduct elections in the state of Texas. I'm passionate about elections, or I wouldn't be standing here. I believe that all of us in this room, all of us in this building, in the state, in the country deserve fair, honest, transparent elections. It shouldn't be that hard. I've been the county clerk since 2007. I've been through hurricanes during election season. I've been through unexpected special called elections, and I've been through COVID during elections. All have been very challenging, but you know what? County clerks are up for it most of the time. I've seen some changes in the election law, obviously, since 2007, some for the good and some not so much for the good. Things that have happened over the last session that were so beneficial to Texans. The ballot tracker. I give all the kudos to Vice Chair Busey on that. Texans can go and look and see where their ballot is once it's been asked, once they've applied, once they've been sent out by our offices, once they've been accepted. So that was a remarkably wonderful thing for Texans. Poll watcher training. Poll watcher training is wonderful. Around the state, we've had so many issues of poll watchers, and 99% of those issues were because a candidate like yourself or me, we would send somebody into the poll and say, hey, go be a poll watcher for me. And they would say, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And you would say, well, just go watch and see what they do and make sure nothing's wrong. Right? So we would, having this poll watcher training through the Secretary of State's office, and they've issued over 7,000 certificates. So that's wonderful that 7,000 people now know what is expected of a poll watcher. And the word is real easy, watch. not to be heard. Watch. The other thing that we've seen that was such a great benefit for Texans was the corrective action process for mail ballots. Used to be that you would mail in your ballot, and if something was wrong, it would be rejected. And now giving Texans the opportunity to correct those problems has been wonderful for the voters. Both associations acknowledge that there is a huge need for more education. There's turnover in this area of elections administration. And so the Texas Association of Counties responded by holding an election academy. The inaugural event was last fall. We're having another one in April. We've obviously worked very closely with the Secretary of State's office on this. And so it's just an added bonus to have another way to educate elections administrators besides the annual conference that the Secretary of State offers. Speaking of the Secretary of State, they've done a great job. They have improved their website for us, because remember, that's who's dealing with in the trenches at home, fielding calls. They've organized their forms, they've improved their website, they've expanded the annual conference, the poll working and poll watcher training. But something that is very concerning to me, being in this job as long as I have, is, you heard Mr. Ingram say it, but in 2007, they had more FTEs than they do now. 30 FTEs, and we know this state is growing. I can't imagine doing an election day after day after day after day with 30 FTEs. And that's, everything from answering calls from those of us to answering the public's calls, et cetera. So we know that their division deserves better. Texans deserve better, so we need to get them more FTEs. Obviously, hot topics that have been covered. I won't rehash the wheel here. The worm technology. Obviously, we're against abolishing schools as polling locations, but we do need to correct the corrective action process. So there is a little caveat there. As a former classroom teacher for 15 years, you're going to hear me say over and over, we need to educate, not legislate. 99% of the issues come from the lack of education. I also don't want to see you legislate 253 counties based on the issue of that one nameless Harris County out there. Bracketing things for larger counties is wonderful. That was done last session with the live streaming video process. Smaller counties, rural counties, our budgets are tight. So obviously, that was bracketed for a certain population area, and that's a good thing. Countywide voting. Chambers County, countywide voting has been really in place since 1990. When I took office, countywide voting was kind of on my mind, but it really wasn't something that I felt necessary at the time. As our county, and we are happily located between Jefferson County and Harris County, and we say that happiness is seeing Harris County in the rearview mirror, that it wasn't a big deal, but our county has been growing and growing and growing. And so the need for countywide polling, and because it is an application process that you go through, I didn't think we really needed it until after the 2020 COVID, et cetera. So we implemented it in 2021. Our voters love it. If you ever drive down Interstate 10 and on your way back and forth from Jefferson County or good old Louisiana, you come right through Chambers County, and there is a river that separates our county, the Trinity River. And so the need for myself was seeing that if there was an accident on the Trinity River Bridge and it was election day, that you were not going to be able to get from your place of employment in Harris County to Smith Point, Texas, or Winnie, Texas on time. And so it just made sense that the more and more voters we have, that countywide polling would benefit. Obviously, it has. And I was with two clerks last night from Valverde. They're at probate school. I met them at the hotel, and I will be more than happy to work with your county clerk. Both. I obviously know Berta, who's no longer a clerk, but I will be more than happy to work with county clerks that want to see the countywide voting. I would hate to see it go away. It really is good. Is there an excuse for lack of paper? Not ever. We were warned, we were screamed, we were told from the get-go by the Secretary of State's office, by our vendors in January of 2022, have enough paper. Okay? So even in countywide voting, there's not an excuse to not have enough paper. Another concern is you brought up threats. You know, I'm not aware of a lot of threats to election officials, especially the county on the county clerk side, but I am very concerned about misinformation. It happened in Chambers County in November. Had somebody that heard, remember that good old social media? Well, I heard that one of our polling locations ran out of paper. But what they really heard was what was happening in Harris County. And they got on Facebook and said, this place is out of paper. And luckily, our county judge's admin, she caught it right off the bat, sent it to me, and I put, fake news, no way, we are not. Misinformation can also disrupt an election. Yeah. So I am concerned about that. Other than that, if you have any questions, I would be more than happy. I brought an example. I think I've made sure that it was in your packet of the corrective action form that we can talk about. Representative Busey, you said, or Chairman Smith, you asked, what else? On the corrective action form that you all have a copy of, this is what we have, and these are the reasons your ballot's getting rejected. If we mail it to you and it says, and of course, thank you for age, voter didn't sign the carrier envelope, signature on carrier envelope, certificate could not be immediately determined if that was the voter, basically don't match. Statement of residence was not included. Missing or incorrect personal identification numbers or social. So that was new to Texans. Senator Creighton, my senator, he wrote the bill out last session. I think it's great. But Texans weren't used to it. And that's where the rejection rate came from, right there. Also, guys, sending a ballot back and forth in the mail, that's not good practice. So what we would like is to be able to send this form. Currently, the law states that they can bring this form back to the elections office. But we're sending these ballots out to 65 and older. There was a reason they were mailed the ballot the first place. We'd like to see this form be able to be mailed back and not hand-delivered. We think that will also help. And then witnessing, and that witnessing had also changed in the last session, and we think as well that some of these issues can be solved by being able to mail this back. Other than that, I will take any question you have.
Yes, sir.
As I love to say, God's country people.
That's right. That's right.
Everything else besides us is adjacent.
That's right. Our mosquitoes are the size of hummingbirds.
And we hate them all the same.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you can answer this question, and I don't know if we need to bring anyone up. Do you know how long, and again, I'm going to completely agree with you. I never an excuse to not have enough paper. Do you know how long that was that county clerk or that they went without paper?
I do not.
Okay.
I do not. It was an elections administrator, not a county clerk.
Oh, yeah,
Let's clarify that for the record.
Right, exactly. Sorry. You're very right about that. Thank you so much. Besides, were there any difficulties for you on election day in Chambers County that you guys had?
So one of the issues, because of the fact that we were mandated to change to a
Yes.
paper-based system, it's the same problems that I think every county incurred. Paper jams, voters trying to shove it in there instead of let it take a natural feed. That's mainly it. And you got to remember, so that goes back to paper. So that paper that's gotten destroyed, right? Now you need another piece of paper. So another reason to always have paper.
And by any chance, did you have any instances of people accidentally walking out with their ballots? Because we had that in Jefferson County. I know people were used to, they thought that was their new paper receipt to go prove that they went, and then they walked out, and then, of course, that ballot had to go provisional.
Absolutely.
And we understand that for integrity. Did you have that issue at all there?
Yes, sir. I think that was a statewide issue when, obviously, the first go-round. We were lucky enough that Tarrant County had used the system before we had, and that Hyder Garcia kind of gave us a little laundry list of, this is what you need to look for. So I was fortunate enough to be able to fund, through the Commissioner's Court, more employees, especially during early voting, to put at each location, to put at the door, so people did not leave with their ballot. Funny enough, my daughter, who lives in Tarrant County, almost walked out the door with her ballot. So, I mean, you can have signs, you can have everything, but there's still that little human error factor. But yes, it was a new thing to Texans. A lot of them thought, oh, here's my receipt,
Right.
not this is my ballot.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
so you would say like having signs, having people was obviously very helpful, but still human error is still human error, whether it's from the voter or if it's from someone, and not saying anyone did it, but human error happen when things are changing. So it was, for all counties, it was, I don't want to say stressful, but changing something that had not been there for over 10 years was a little taxing to have to get voters as well as anyone who was now working on elections, like people who were volunteering their time. It was a little taxing to have to make sure everyone was making sure they were following the law correctly as what it was, correct?
Yes,
Or
sir.
what it is, excuse me.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And setting up your polling location, we actually were fortunate enough to set up some of our polling locations almost like a cow chute. You know, like you have to follow the yellow brick road to get out of here.
Very new way of walking
A
around.
very new way of
Yes,
setting up
exactly.
things inside the polls.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Vice Chair Busey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a few things. You mentioned kind of why ballots were getting rejected in Chambers County. Are any because they're not eligible to vote? Is that happening at all?
Yes, but that happens, Vice Chair, at the application
earlier
process. Right, that if you're not registered, you're not going to get,
Yeah.
you're not even going to get that far.
No, I agree. So I guess what I'm getting at is, so when we're rejecting 3% of ballots, these are 3% of registered Texans who had their votes tossed out
Correct.
because of, I mean, we
A
talked
technicality.
a technicality. That just, that's incredibly concerning to me. Not because of you, because of the laws we pass that are throwing out Texans' votes. That's on us.
And if I can elaborate, I even had phone calls from older people that said, just forget it, because, and we kept trying and working through, okay, let me walk you through it again. Now you see this. And so, yeah, that is concerning, especially for those older Texans that are the core of this state.
Giving up
Giving up.
on their right to the ballot box.
Yep.
That's disappointing when that's what we're doing as legislators. I appreciate your time. Thanks you for all your work and everything you do.
Absolutely.
Any other questions of this witness? Yes, sir.
In your opinion, what do you think would help with the mail-in ballots the way they are now to make sure that we're not losing Texas voters so that they're not frustrated? Do you think there's something that could be put in with it? What would be your opinion without interjecting how I feel, just as someone who's been doing this a lot longer?
So we actually kind of took it upon ourselves when that initial crunch of the March primary happened with all the new rules and all the new forms to add a little gold sheet that said, don't forget, don't forget, don't forget. Excuse me, lovely pollen y'all have here in Austin. But yes, there are, and I think that the corrective action form being able to be mailed, et cetera, will help. But yes, there are little tricks to the trade, so to speak. We learned that over time. I mean, so we'll educate, we keep educating, best practices, and we're getting there.
Thank you so much again.
Ms. Hawthorne, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you being here. I can't help but notice, but your last name is Hawthorne, and that you may or may not be married to Sheriff Hawthorne. Is that correct?
I sleep with the sheriff, yes, I do.
That's what I get for getting into that. Hey, it's good to see the sheriff here. Yes, and just briefly, the chair would like to recall Keith Ingram from the Secretary of State's office. Mr. Ingram, again, your name is Keith Ingram, and you're testifying on behalf of the Texas Secretary of State's office.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Manuel, I think you had a question. Thank you.
I'm not going to lie and say one question because then I got in trouble for that before, but I did have, this is an important question for me, and I'm going to be honest, completely out of the loop, and first-time candidate, and, you know, it was like riding a bicycle through hell and the wheels were on fire. How long did that period last in Harris County where there wasn't paper? How long did that actually last? Was it a day? I'm not saying there's an excuse. I'm just trying to see how long that was happening where there was not paper, especially since I know Representative Valerie was saying that it was in Precinct 3. I was just wondering, how long was that going on?
So we first started getting reports of it in mid-afternoon, 2:30, 3 o'clock, 3:30 range.
Okay.
And I was still getting calls about it at 8:30 that night.
And did it persist to the next day, or was it something that was just a one? I'm not, like, again, not making any excuses. I just wanted to know how long. Was it the next day process? Was it like maybe every other day, or was it that time frame that in between 2:30, 3 o'clock till 8 o'clock there was, you know, a paper issue, and then the next day it was fixed?
So the election, it was election day, so the election had to be finished. Whoever was in line at 7 p.m. got to vote, and after that, it's finished. So there was no next day on this one.
Okay. That was my main question. I wanted to see how long that had lasted. So it lasted for several hours.
That's right, yes, sir.
And actually, you know, this is it. Let's just say, in an instance, God forbid that ever happens again, what would you want an elections administrator, county clerk, who should be the person that they would go to in an instant to go pick up more paper, or is there a mechanism for that?
So as I said before, elections are a logistical exercise, and you should have, especially in a county like Harris, pre-positioned assets. So you should have, you know, regional centers where you can hotshot to polling places from a regional location fairly quickly.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Representative Ayala.
Pandora's box was open.
Sure, absolutely, I understand.
And just to be clear, just so the record's straight, there were polling locations without paper for hours, that you understood, as was reported to you.
That's right.
On election day, there being no tomorrow to fix it.
That's right.
It necessarily had an effect on voter turnout. Had to, correct?
I agree, and you know, like we were talking about before, since it's countywide, if your polling place that you went to at 2:30, you've got plenty of time to go elsewhere in the county to go vote. So my hope is that a lot of folks did that, took advantage of the countywide system.
That would be nice. But same with the voting by mail. If that's too cumbersome, there's still time to go and exercise a provisional ballot.
They could.
So there are
or
remedies to that as
They could surrender their mail ballot and vote in person, but, you know, obviously elderly and disabled, there's a reason why they're voting by mail.
Not necessarily, but I mean, you're right. That's one of the reasons, but not in all cases.
Sure.
And again, I don't want to belabor the point that I'm belaboring, but just to say this, what happened in Harris County cannot happen again.
Totally agree with that.
Okay, thank you.
Brief question, Representative Morales?
My question was addressed.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ingram. Appreciate
you.
it very much. Members, if there's no other business, we don't have any other witnesses. So just a reminder that our normal meetings are going to be in here at 10:30 or upon adjournment next Thursday. We will be hearing bills next week, so I'm looking forward to very vigorous discussion on those things, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all at that time. If no one else has any other business and there is no objection, then the Elections Committee stands adjourned, subject to the call of the chair.